Good evening, ma'am.
Should be like this. Good evening, sir. Good evening. And extremely sorry, got delayed.
No problem.
We had another meeting scheduled in this link and got delayed. I think we can get started. Good afternoon. Most welcome the participants online. Most welcome Dr. Bennett, whom the literature community, the students especially, the youngsters, know as a ready reckoner on literature and criticism, a person who has always been of a big support to the Department of English, Bishop Heber College, in the sense that he has never said a no to any of our invitations. He's always said an instant yes to all invitations, and we've been for years together great beneficiaries of his knowledge of literature, his sharing of experiences of literature mostly, and he would always adopt a kind of a personalized experience of literature that he so ardently shared with the student community. And I'm so happy that sir is with us to share his views on what he calls as post-truth. And his reflections, of course, will take us a long way in understanding what he or what literature today or culture today means by truth and what is post-truth. So most welcome, sir. Welcome to the forum. Thank you very much for accepting invitation. I invite Dr. Ronald to invite,
Good evening, every one of you. I welcome the participants, faculty, and research scholars from the other institutions. Also extend a very warm welcome to our principal, Dr. D. Paul Dayabaran, for his constant support and guidance in all of our endeavors. I extend a cordial welcome to the members of the advisory committee, Dr. Suresh Frederick, UG Head, Department of English, Dean of Research and Development, and Dr. C. Dhanapal, Coordinator, Shift 2, and Dean of Training and Placement. I welcome my colleagues, the organizing committee, other participants from the college to this event. And I'd like to place on record the thanks to IT support for their continued support. Without further delay, I would like to introduce the speaker of the day. It is our distinguished privilege and honor to have one of the renowned personalities of literature, whose depth and wealth of knowledge of literature in general and literary theories in particular is worth mentioning. Dr. Bennett, we fondly call him as Bennett Sir, is known for his thankless job of helping the young aspirants to clear NET exam through his meticulous and highly informative lectures and training, which have helped many pursue their teaching career. I believe that this session will turn out to be a rewarding experience for us, since our speaker has a very rich academic experience and expertise gained from his 30+ years of teaching English at various capacities. He wears many different hats besides being a professor, like a Board of Studies member for various institutions of repute, member of Indian Association for American and Canadian Studies, subject expert, inspection commission for Bharatidasan University, author, writer, scholar, several scores of scholarly articles in reputed journals across the globe. He has served as a resource person in various seminars and refresher courses, both in India and abroad, for subjects like history, English, literary theories, and it's our privilege to have him. I now request Dr. Bennett, sir, to walk us through the session. Yours. Bennett, sir? Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Good evening, everybody. I'm very happy that I have been invited again by the Department of English, Bishop Weber College, for yet another lecture. This time for participants in the faculty development program. I'm very happy about the choice of subjects to be discussed, and I'm particularly thankful to Mr. Ronald for all those warm words of appreciation. I thank the management, the principal, and the head of the Department of English, and Dr. Shobana, and all their esteemed colleagues in the Department of English for inviting me again to talk on a subject that has been discussed in the academic world for the last 5 years and more. Now, the concept of truth and the concept of falsehood are what we come to believe as real or imaginary. Now, all these ideas of truth and falsehood, they conflict in such a manner we are unable to distinguish one from the other. Now, let me focus your attention on our traditional views on truth, or our traditional views on different types of truth. I don't have any PowerPoint presentation, though I wanted to prepare a PowerPoint. I was not able to prepare one. Hope it is visible. Yes. I'm sharing a.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
This is just for our understanding. Now, there are various theories related to truth. So, the first part of my lecture would focus on truth, then the second part on post-truth, so that we can understand what truth is all about and post-truth is all about. So, I was looking for definition on truth. Then I came across many theories on truth itself. The first one is what can be termed as correspondence theory. Now, there is a strong correspondence between the true proposition, and when a proposition is true, it is identical to a fact. Let me explain this. You make a true proposition. For example, you say the earth revolves around the sun and rotates on its own axis. It is a well-established truth. It's a fact. Suppose I make a proposition, a true proposition, the earth revolves around the sun and rotates on its own axis. I'm making a proposition and it is identical to a fact. And I make this proposition with a clear belief that my proposition or the true proposition is correct. Remember, in the past, people had problems whenever they made such true propositions. So this is correspondence. Correspondence between true proposition. There are also false propositions. Okay. At one point in history, people believed the whole universe had 3 tiers: heaven above, earth in the middle, and hell, down below. There was this 3-tier: heaven, earth, and hell. For a long time, people held on to this proposition and believed it to be true. But today, the moment we talk about correspondence, we are very clear. It is something that can be verified, and it has what we call an empirical status, something that is observable, something that we observe and believe it to be true and come to an understanding because of various supporting facts. So now this correspondence theory, it makes it very clear. There is a strict correspondence between a true proposition or the proposition is identical to a fact. Now, there are true propositions and false proposition, and facts just are true propositions. What we call facts are true propositions and they are not false propositions. So I'm going slow and let me try and explain what these theories are all about. The second most important theory is the coherence. Now, as we understand the term coherence, it comes to mean truth is an essential nature. In its essential nature is that it is a systematic coherence, which is the character of its whole. There is coherence. Say, when I present something or when I talk, now I'm talking about the truth and falsehood, I try and attempt to say something in a coherent manner. That's why I'm using this PowerPoint on a slide and I'm trying to tell you, look, this is a subject I am talking about and I don't want to talk at random on this subject. Let me be very clear. So let me go one after another, and by saying so or doing so, I try to achieve some sort of coherence. Coherence in my language, coherence in my presentation, and coherence in my argument. So whatever you regard as true, it has a pattern and it is very much coherent. So going by that coherence itself, you can safely come to the conclusion whatever is discussed, whatever is said is true. For instance, I'll give you an example for coherence. Say, it is closely related to logic also when we talk about coherence. Say, when you present a problem, a mathematical problem, for instance, you cannot make a jump from the first to the last, or even within inside a chemistry classroom or a physics classroom. When you want to prove a theory, or when you want to prove that something is a theory, it's not a mere hypothesis, it's a theory, you go one after another. Take for instance, something like Archimedes' principle. Archimedes' principle is basically about buoyancy. It doesn't matter how much is weight is dispersed. You take into account the weight that is displaced, whether the object or the body is completely or partially immersed. It is equal to the buoyant effect. Okay. So now when you make a presentation or when you make the argument, you argue systematically and coherently so that someone understands and comes to the conclusion whatever is said is true. So most of the theories are proved like that. Most of the scientific facts are established like this. But the next important thing is what we call a pragmatic one. Now, what is pragmatics, or what is pragmatic truth? Now, there are many pragmatic theories. The first one was C.S. Peirce. You must have heard of C.S. Peirce, a logician, then again a linguist, and above all, he first proposed the pragmatic theory of truth. Now, according to him, true beliefs are those that will withstand future scrutiny. Let me repeat. True beliefs are those that will withstand future scrutiny. Not only the present one, it will also withstand the future scrutiny. Effectively, he is saying, whatever is regarded as true, it is true today and it will be true tomorrow and forever. It will not be contested, or the statement or the fact will not be contested because we keep contesting. Look at the Ptolemy's worldview. Now, Ptolemy famously claimed the earth was at the center. So it was a geocentric view. But that view held for, let us say, 1,000 and odd years. Then came Copernicus on the scene, who challenged this concept, and he proved it was heliocentric and not geocentric. The sun was at the center. So, according to C.S. Lewis, a pragmatic theory will also hold true or withstand future scrutiny. But the man who popularized pragmatic theory of truth was none other than William James. So, according to him, true beliefs are dependable and useful. They're very simple. Now, I'm not trying to make it complicated by making it sound like serious philosophy. Just I'm taking these definitions given by these people and trying to explain to them in simple words. True beliefs are dependable and useful. They have a practical value. So if you believe that something to be true, well, now that truth claim can be established, or the truth factor can be established by being useful. Okay, for instance, if a government claims it's a socialist government, or a government that believes in social welfare schemes, the government, if you want to believe that, you have to look into the action. So, for instance, the Indian government, it swears by, it calls itself a welfareist government, and it introduces many social welfare schemes. How do you believe what the government does is true? Only by looking at its social action or looking at its social welfare measures that reach the poor, the downtrodden, and the poverty-ridden populace of this country. So now you come to believe this government is a government which practices social welfare, and it also believes in socialist measures. Then by its action, you come to believe, according to William James, that is, they are useful. You believe in a socialist thought or in a socialist philosophy, which extends itself to social welfare measures and social action, and you come to believe this is true, that is, a socialist thought to be true, only by looking at the social welfare measures and social action. I'm trying to make it simple. Please follow me. Whereas John Dewey, a famous educationist, he reframed truth in terms of, now listen carefully, he reframed the whole concept of truth in terms of warranted assertability. Now, how you can assert that something, necessarily assert that something is true? How do you do that? That is, that truth is a property of well-verified claims or judgments. So, well-verified claims or judgments. So, truth is a property of that. So, now, only through such assertion, well, now, again, he talks about two things. One is moral truth. The other one is interpreted truth. Now, moral truths are true all times. Even a few thousand years ago, stealing was considered immoral. It is considered immoral even now, and it will be considered immoral even in future. So, and telling lies, even telling lies is considered immoral. I will come to that a little later. Then interpreted truth. Truth is not only subject to verification, it is also subject to interpretation. The same thing, same action, it can be interpreted in many ways. Now, so he talks about our judgment. or warranted acceptability. That's the term used by John Dewey to refer to something called what he calls a pragmatic truth. So we have seen Dewey, William James, and C.S. Pierce talking about truth in pragmatic terms. Now, interpreted truth, I told you, I talked about interpreted truth. Now, this is a pluralist concept of truth. Now, what do you mean by a pluralist concept of truth? So, now when you move on to the pluralist concept, truth can be viewed as seen from different angles, and it is the same, and you can come to what we call a logical pluralism or possible universals. I'll tell you what it is. So, for example, if you make a claim that if petrol prices go up, necessarily the economy slows down. It's going to be true. So, or the gas prices go up, when the gas prices go up, the economy slows down. Americans call it gas. So, now it affects your GDP and so on. Now here, we are using what can be termed as a universal generalization. Now, this can be true to India, this can be true to Western countries, it can be true to any country in any part of the world. Now, we also use, right, another argument, that is, when you talk about this is universal generalization. When we talk about the pluralist concept of truth, truths are knowable. Now, I told you previously, it is empirical, it is observable, and it can be proved in a certain manner. Sometimes this concept of truth is this, that is, it is non-empirical and it is a kind of a priori knowledge, a form of tacit agreement that this is true. So now, before you start checking the facts, before you start checking the propositions and facts, before you start looking into the coherence of something or the pragmatic implications of true claims, you have this agreement. It appears to be true, and they are knowable to you with the help of language, knowable to you because of your sense of judgment, and you come to understanding. See, usually people say the policeman can easily identify a criminal. They can easily identify whether a man is lying or not. Though the policeman knows that someone is a criminal, but the burden is upon him to prove in a court of law why that person had come, why this particular person had committed that particular crime. Easily, because he's a die-hard criminal, a criminal with a long record of criminal activities. And he knows by just taking a look at him that this fellow was behind this whole evil act. Now, that is, the truth through your intuition, right? Intuitively, you know this to be true. And even among your colleagues, there is a tacit agreement that this person is a criminal, but you need to prove that. That is what they call circumstantial evidence in a court of law. If you really want to prove something to be true, you need to have this circumstantial evidence, which should come and help you to prove that this was true. Okay, now this a priori knowledge I told you about a little while ago. Now, what is this a priori knowledge? By its very word a priori, the implication is that is, before something is proved to be true, the truth exists. The truth exists. And that is why the ancients had terms, some terms like apodictic statements. You know, what are these apodictic statements? Have you come across this word, apodictic? It's a very interesting word that has been used. Apodictic, A-P-O-D-I-C-T-I-C. Now, what does that word mean? It simply means something that is clearly established or beyond dispute. Apodictic. When you say this statement or this claim to be true, that is, it is beyond dispute. No one can argue or dispute about this claim. So now, before I go into that, the ancients had this. I'll be referring to it a little later. Now, what are these logical truths? So the moment we talk about logical truth, or we talk about logic, that is, we are using a kind of movement from one to another in order to establish a fact. Now, there ought to be a logical progression. It could be a mathematical one, or a scientific one, or a legal one, whereby you try to prove something to be true using your reason, using your logical progression from one state to another, from that to another, or from one step to another, and so on. So now, when you use such logic, people accept it to be true. See, most of the arguments in a court of law, they use logic to establish truth. If you want to establish a scientific fact, you need to use logic. Now, the moment you find something to be illogical, something that need not progress from one step to another or one state to another, you dismiss it as illogical. Sometimes we say this argument is illogical. Say, for instance, there was this argument. Say, the arguments go on worldwide. Okay, arguments about war, arguments about pandemic disease, and so on. Now, it sounds illogical. Okay, you must have read in newspapers in recent times about this lady called Chitra Ramakrishna. Now, she was the CEO of National Stock Exchange. I'm sure you must have read her story in the newspaper. And she was also in charge of Securities and Exchange Board of India. And she made this famous claim that she sent a regular mail to a particular email ID to a yogi, whom she refers to as Siddha Purusha, right? Who lives in the Himalayas. She never bothered to check the real existence of such a human being, but she shared and divulged details related to, even confidential details related to National Stock Exchange through email for so many years. Now, the email address read something like this: Rick yajusama@outlook.com. And for many of us who listen to this kind of claim, it sounds illogical. To a nameless person, you send email disclosing the secrets, the national secrets of something that is related to economics, because the daily average turnover of National Stock Exchange is to the tune of 64,000 crores. Now, 64,000 crores of rupees is transacted every day at National Stock Exchange. So the information, the economic information, is very sensitive. Now, there is also a possibility for insider trading and so on. But how could someone send all this and take directions from that person? So one more person has been arrested. I think it was yesterday, one Anand Subramanian, who happens to be her advisor. And she also created an office for this Mr. Anand Subramanian called Group Operating Officer, GOO. There is no place for creating such an office in National Stock Exchange. But this lady managed to create one for this Anand Subramanian. So when you read all these things in newspaper, it looks like a fantasy tale, right? But this is true. What she had done was true. The messages she had sent, through email and received through email, all were true. But for you and me, it sounds absolutely illogical. As a head of such an economic institution, how could she send a message to a person whom she had never seen, and how she kept receiving instructions from that person without verifying the identity of the person? After all, this person was referred to as a yogi and Siddha Purusha. That sounds absolutely illogical, but it is true, right? The messages she sent, they were true. We'll read more about, but look at postmodern concept or postmodern theory of truth. Postmodernism says there are multiple truth claims. There are multiple truth claims. There is nothing called the truth or the truth. Nothing called the truth. So, truth is something that is manufactured. Truth is something that we human beings produce and claim to be true. So, for instance, what we call religion, there are multiple truth claims. Every religion claims its belief is to be true. We don't contest that. We don't contest someone's truth claim or someone else's truth claim, right? And ultimately, we come to a generalization, all religions say the same. So, the truth claims may vary. Just, I will spend a couple of minutes on truth before I move on to post-truth. So, all along, do we mean to say the world was experiencing a climate of truth-telling? Let me repeat, all these years were we experiencing a way of life that was only based on truth? No, that is not true. But we claim we have come to a state where we have moved beyond truth and we have warmly embraced lies, fake news, fake history, now even fake following using fake bots. And we have gone into a world where the people of the world have lost their capacity, have lost the ability to distinguish between truth and falsehood. I'll come to that. So I was telling you about, just let me move on to the next slide, just to help us. Now, the concept of aletheia. Now, aletheia is the spirit of truth in Greek philosophy. Now, when you say aletheia is the spirit of truth, this is truth or disclosure. You open up, that is, you reveal something, you disclose something, or what we call unconcealedness, unclosedness. So you make it plain to others. Now you don't hide something in your heart or hide something. Instead, you choose to tell something now to others. Now, aletheia is not a god or goddess. Aletheia is the spirit of truth. In the 20th century, Martin Heidegger uses this concept of aletheia. Thus, literature. Now, literature claims to be a mechanism for truth-telling. Does it always reveal a moral truth? Does it always talk about an intellectual truth? Does it always talk about moral truth? Does it always talk about intellectual truth? Does it always talk about emotional truth? So, if you say literature is all about these three, it may not talk about scientific truth. It may talk about moral truth, intellectual truth, and emotional truth. So, if it is truth disclosure, then literature is something to be valued above others. But remember, Plato famously made this remark, all poets are liars. Kavinyanam poyame. If all, poets means creative writers. If all creative writers are liars, according to Plato, in his Republic, he says, don't allow him to live in your midst. Send him to the next town. Receive him in your midst and do all the honors, but do not allow him to stay with you because he will spoil the minds of the young. So, now Martin Heidegger, he uses the term aletheia, and he talks about the purpose of literature. If the purpose of literature is to tell moral truths, if the purpose of literature is to tell us intellectual truths, or if the purpose of literature is to tell us emotional truths, then accept literature as the power of truth. Okay. Now, this concept of aletheia, or the spirit of aletheia, is something opposed to what we call dolos, D-O-L-O-S. Dolos means a trickery. Now, dolos, now is trickery. Aletheia, that is truth, as opposed to trickery. In the post-truth world, we have come to embrace, we have come to accept all forms of trickery, which come in the form of some kind of a game that we play. Then it is also opposed to, aletheia is something opposed to what we term apate, A-P-A-T. What is apate? It is a deception. So you play deception on someone through something, your truth claim or anything, you try to say for a very long time. So the Western, this morning newspaper, you read today's Hindu, President Putin describes the West as an empire of lies. As an empire of lies. Now, his claim was, Ukraine was a country which was full of neo-Nazis, right-wing fellows, and these fellows were the ones who joined hands with the German Nazis before Second World War, and they were the ones responsible for the extermination of Jews. And some of the gas chambers, Jewish gas chambers, were located in Ukraine. Of course, this was a historical fact, but he was borrowing this historical fact to wage war against a weakened Ukraine now in order to establish his hegemony over that nation. And he borrows something from the past, from a distant past, and he also had accused the Ukrainians of practicing genocide against the Russian people. Well, in order to wage a war, you had to come up with certain truth claims. And as a result of these practices of a neighboring country, you had to wage war to stop these practices. Now, that was President Putin's claim. According to the people in the West, this was a whole deception to invade Ukraine, to prevent it from joining, NATO. Okay. Now, look at this. This is a deception played by President Putin. So now look at that. One group, he claims it to be true, and he calls the West as an empire of lies, but they in turn call him or accuse him of practicing deception or appate. Then the whole thing in a war is pseudo-logoi. Pseudo-logoi, language. Logoi means a language. So pseudo-logoi means lies. In any war, the first casualty is the truth. You must have come across this famous statement. In any war, the first casualty is truth. You do not know which side swears by truth and whose argument is truth and who is winning on the battlefield. That is also a big question mark. Okay, so I'll come to that. Now, look at all this. I already told you about Ptolemy and Copernicus. Just take a look at Immanuel Kant. When he talked about truth, he said simply, when the Enlightenment project began, dare to know what? Using your reason, dare to know K or knowledge with capital, K in capital. You dare to know, find out what is it, what is this, or what is behind it. And that is the whole, that is the whole basis for the Enlightenment movement or project. Dare to know, this is Immanuel Kant. Take a huge jump from Immanuel Kant to the 20th century. Look at Jean Baudrillard, the French philosopher, who uses the term simulacrum. He's a postmodern theorist, and he has made this term simulacrum quite popular. Now, according to Jean Baudrillard, there are two things. One is the whole notion of simulating. Now, what do we mean by to simulate? To simulate is to feign or to pretend to have what one hasn't. Say, I pretend to be a millionaire, whereas I don't have even 2 lakhs in my savings bank account. Now, what do? I pretend, I feign to have, even pretend to have, it may be wealth, it may be knowledge, or it may be anything, or it could be material, or it could be anything which I pretend to have, I pretend, I simulate. This is the absence of something which I claim to possess. Now, there is also the term dissimulate. Now, this is to feign not to have what one has. That is dissimulate. Not to have what one has. I have a lot of money, but I go around, okay, I can afford to buy a car, even I can afford to buy many such things, but I don't have a car. I just walk on the road, wearing ordinary sandals. Now, pretending to be that I don't have something, though I have that. So, look at the word dissimulate and simulate. Simulate is to feign to have what one hasn't. To dissimulate is to feign not to have what one has. You have something, that is the presence, right? So maybe you are a knowledgeable person, but you act like a joker in front of others, right? Now, you are a very knowledgeable person, you are a great scientist, but you behave as if you are an idiot. That is to dissimulate. You pretend to be a great scholar when you are not one. So look at these two terms, simulate and dissimulate. He comes up with, now, he gives this example. Now, that is the produced symptom and an authentic symptom. Let me explain. you suffer from a certain disease. You look at the symptoms which are authentic. These symptoms mean you suffer from a certain ailment. You suffer from certain pathological condition. Now, that is authentic symptom. Then the pretended or produced symptom, the produced symptom also look almost as good as or as similar to the authentic symptom. It is a form of a fakery, right? But people say, because of your auto suggestion, say, suppose I want to produce fever in my body, all I need to do is to repeat to myself, tell myself again and again to produce a symptom, and it looks like a real fever and real headache because there is no difference between this produced symptom and this authentic symptom. In a way, the produced symptom also appears to be authentic, appears to be true. So now let me go and explain a little further the whole concept of simulation. According to him, according to Jean Baudrillard, the simulacra is true. Now, why did he say that? Because it challenges the distinction between real and illusion. So literature also does the same. It is very much relevant to literature. It closes the distinction between, for example, he gives the example of Disneyland. Now, a Disneyland is a place. If you want to see, you walk into Disneyland, you see a swamp. A swamp is where you find alligators or crocodiles and all those animals. Say, you go to a swamp, maybe on the Gangetic Plains, or in a state like Florida or Louisiana in America. You go to a real swamp and you wait for hours together to spot a crocodile. Sometimes you may not see or you may not even spot a crocodile. But here in Disneyland, everything is perfect. You walk in and it is a swamp and you find a lot of crocodiles there, and even the crocodiles willingly oblige you for a photo shoot. So here everything is perfect. Now he calls this hyperreal. Neither real nor an illusion, but a hyperreal, a state of hyperreal, which he chooses to call the similar. And for him, this is more true than the real swamp. The swamp that you see inside the Disneyland is more true than the real swamp that you find in Florida or Louisiana in America. So in postmodern times, we find the distinction between these two have been collapsed. I'll explain this concept of a Rashmon Effect. Now, what is this Rashmon Effect? Rashmon is the title of an Akira Kurosawa film. I encourage you to go and watch the film. This is about the murder of a young samurai and the rape of his wife. The event is recollected by 4 different people. They tell the story, and that is the film. So, who is the actual perpetrator of this murder, and who is the actual rapist? 4 different people tell us. It is almost similar to the story. You remember the story where 6, visually challenged men, they go and touch an elephant, and one touches the tusk, another one the leg, right? Then they touch, another one touches the ear of an elephant. They touch different parts of the body of an elephant, and they come to a conclusion, this is true of this animal. And in that perception, that is true. The one who touches the leg, and the another one who touches the tail of an elephant, another one who touches the tusk of an elephant, They all come to a different conclusion, and this is what an elephant is. So the Rashmon effect is always operant. When different people tell you this is to be true, each one is true in a way, but not true fully. Get my point? So now this is the case of truth. And Foucault, he borrows the original term used by Plato called parrhesiastes. Now, who is a parrhesiaste? One who tells the truth. And how he tells the truth. So sometimes parrhesia, the act of telling truth. For instance, a parrhesiast needs to have the moral qualities which are required first to say that something is true. There is a risk or danger for him in telling the truth. Say, who will go and tell the Prime Minister and Chief Minister what you do is right or wrong? For which you need to have courage. We live in a democratic world, and we always say, we hide behind our mobile phones and we claim, and we say this is right or wrong. But in good old days, if you want to go and tell a sovereign or a tyrant that his tyranny is against justice, it needs courage. But people went and told the sovereign, a man with unlimited powers, right, who is almost equated to God, and people had the courage to go and tell him that he was morally wrong. Now, and what he says is true. What the king does is wrong or against injustice especially. And this is a philosopher who speaks the truth. This truth is called parrhesia. Now, it is linked to courage, and it is a form of criticism. Now, many journalists claim to have this kind of parrhesia, and they are all parrhesiastes. Look at the people who report from the war zone. So, when they report from the war zone, they risk their lives. They go to the war zone, right? And they send the reports. They give reports. They know well that they may be even killed by a stray bullet. But what eggs them on? What, makes them go to such places? Because truth ought to be known. Truth ought to be told. Now, Foucault talks about this kind of truth telling the world, this is true about this situation. This is true about a government. This is true about a war. This is true about an economy. This is true about a riot. This is true about something. So today we find, truth telling is popular not only with, or it is, and I should not be using the term popular, it is a principle that governs not only literary writers, but also journalists. This whole concept of parrhesia, it is a form of criticism. And some people talk about democratic parrhesia. Now, democratic parrhesia, where you reserve the right to speak the truth, right to talk, right to speech, right to what kind of speech? Not any speech that is frivolous, not any speech that is full of lies or a bundle of lies. It is a speech, especially when you talk before democracy or ecclesia, that is in a parliament, in a place. When you talk only the truth. So, or before a court of law, even under the oath, you claim whatever I speak is truth, nothing but the truth. So He calls that parrhesia. Right? I'll just quickly move on. Now, I have told you enough about truth. Now, welcome to the post-truth society. What has happened in our present day world? In the year 2016, Oxford Dictionary, it declared post-truth as the word of the year. Now, there are many synonyms to post-truth, something like enhanced truth, soft truth, manufactured truth, and so on. So today, for example, many people try to manufacture truth. And I showed you Hannah Arendt's book in the previous slide, titled The Origin of Totalitarianism. Today, people feel comfortable with lies even. Hannah Arendt famously says, it is not simply the distinction between fact and fiction have been collapsed, and the distinction between true and false, she says, it no longer exists. And we have come to allow these two to exist or coexist because we have lost the capacity to distinguish between true and false. Sometimes, say, when we were students in those days, even the students' language was so good, they would be able to distinguish between good English and bad English. And today we live in a world, even the students are not able to distinguish between good English and bad English. They are not able to spot the grammatical mistakes in a teacher's language, or in a fellow scholar's, or in a fellow student's language. Why? We have simply lost this ability or capacity to judge a language on the basis of good language or bad language. So much so, we have come to live in a world we are not able to distinguish between true and false. Hannah Arendt famously says that. So today, there is something called fake news. You can manufacture, say, 2 years ago, someone in my department showed me, claimed to me, I mean, don't go that far. A few months ago, there was a circular that was posted on the WhatsApp, which claimed that Anna University would be conducting set exams very soon. I looked at it and I discovered it to be fake because some parts are taken and pasted from Mother Teresa University, which held the examination in the past. Now they have made some kind of photo trickery or whatever you call it, and they made it appear to be from Anandai University. Now, by taking just a look at this, I said, this is a fake one. It's fake news. But when you take a look, everything was similar, including the insignia of the university and the letterhead and all those fake news. Similarly, pseudoscience. During the time of pandemic, we have listened to so many pseudoscientists. Right? We know there is no cure for COVID-19. And yet, different people came and told us different things, right? And even fake science today, it is flourishing. Fake science. Now, what today people talk about alternative medicine, alternative knowledge, alternative. The moment they use the term alternative, okay, to a certain extent, this alternative knowledge systems are good or maybe true, but we need to know which is fake science. There are people who are climate change deniers. They deny no climate change in place. I was reading a small piece of news. Look at the winter in the West. It is snowing a lot. It is very cold. That is climate change. This is how winter ought to be. But he forgets the scientific fact. during this season, winter season in the northern hemisphere and in the upper regions of northern hemisphere, where the temperature is cold, the rain comes in the form of snow. And it rains throughout the world, unseasonal rain. Why? No longer we have destroyed the forests, and we have swathes and swathes of in bushes and forest lands. They have burned down, and we have felled trees. As a result, the oceans are absorbing the heat. So the UV radiation, ultraviolet radiation, or the sun's heat, in simple words, is absorbed by the oceans. The earth acts like a container. So it evaporates the heat induced from water. Water vapor evaporates and it rains. In winter also rains, and in the northern hemisphere, in the northern reaches, when it rains, it falls in the form of snow. Without knowing the scientific facts, people argue and they talk as if it was science. Then fake history. People try to create fake history because history cannot be verified always. It can be verified in the form of archaeology. It can be verified in the form of literature, in the form of history books, and so on. And today, attempts have been made to create or rewrite history of the world and history of many countries, trying to deny that certain incidents never happened in history. So, for example, the Iranians, for instance, they find that the Holocaust never took place. You have material evidence to show, documentary evidence to show how the Jews were paraded and they were taken to gas chambers and they were taken to burial grounds where they were shot dead. But the Iranians and many others say the Jews are making a false claim and they are called Holocaust deniers. Such a thing never happened in history. A country like Iran, for a long time, they never gave importance to the pre-Islamic past. It became an Islamic nation maybe 1,200 years ago. I do not know the dates for sure, or 1,300, 400 years ago. Before that, it was a pagan nation. But that history is not. For example, the life of Emperor Darius or the Achaemenid Empire, which lasted for more than 3 centuries. The Iranians were very powerful. The Persians, as they were called then, the Persian Empire was brought down by Greeks. Those things never find a place in the history book. In its place comes another history, another saying, which we call fake history. Come to another one. I'll take you another 5 minutes and I'll stop. That is fake followers. I've seen all these YouTube subscribers and so on. They create fake followers through bots. Okay, I can go and press it and do certain things, and I can create 1.2 million followers, 33K or 33,000 followers. All these things go on unchecked. And today, the worst thing is we never care about whether it is true or false. Whether it is, that is what makes this post-truth world an unbearable one. And in this post-truth world, we don't care much about truth or lies. We never care about fact or fiction, and we never care about them. We never care to know. Now, Mary Kahn, this is a wonderful book. This is a memoir. She has written a book titled The Liars Club. Now, very interesting book. It's a memoir where people tell lies. It may be a cock and bull story that someone shares with others, or the moment you open your mouth, it is nothing but lies and lies. So today, the world leaders, the so-called leaders, I'm not going to name presidents and prime ministers, they all belong to the liars club. But I want to give you some statistical detail. This can be found in this book by Michiko Kakutani in her work, The Death of Truth. Now, Michiko Kakutani, she was working for New York Times as a chief book critic. Then she was so exercised by the world turning into a post-truth world, she decided to write this book called The Death of Truth. She gives as example President Trump's rule. Now, in her book, she says, and they made a study, and this study was not made by New York Times, by the Washington Post. During the first year in his office, when President Donald Trump was a ruler, there were 2,140 false or misleading claims made by him. Every day he was tweeting, not once a day, 3 times a day, or even 5 times a day, or 10 times a day. So he kept on tweeting. When they started checking, when they started making factual checks or checking the facts, they discovered in his first year in office, there were 2,140 false or misleading claims. A president, okay, president of a country, a democratic country. So I'm not going to extend beyond that. And we live in such a world where people talk about, truth decay and reams of falsehood that are rolled out. Now there is a war between Ukraine and Russia. You will hear a lot more. So the Russian army is in a denial mode. It has lost thousands of its soldiers. Maybe they haven't lost thousands of their soldiers. Who is telling the truth? The Ukrainian president claims already 4,500 Russians have died. Now that may be true or may not be true. And the Ukrainians claim only 340 citizens have been killed, and they don't give any report about the death of their own soldiers. So in no war, you will find anything to be true. So now, in our country, we have listened to our politicians. I'm not going to name any politician. What do they say? All the demagoguery. Now we talk about the political demagoguery. The way they talk, full of lies. Sometimes we know, right? Or in the name of establishing truth, it could be any incident, right? In the name of establishing truth, they even form truth commissions to establish a lie. That is the world in which we live. Now, where does literature figure in here? For a long time, we know literature is nothing but fiction. We use the term fiction. It claims there may be autobiographical or semi-autobiographical writings, meaning it is partly true, not fully true. So even autobiographical novel we claim, right? Or historiographic meta-fiction, partly history, partly fiction, and not completely history and not completely fiction. We have used terms like that. Historiographic meta-fiction. And there is a realism, and literature has collapsed that kind of realism. In its place has come something called magical realism, and magic defies our reason. Magic cannot be real, far removed from our physical world. So there are many things to literature. So literature remains as it were all along. It tells a story, an imaginary story. an escapist story. It tells us just to entertain us and to appeal to our aesthetics, not more. So, if anyone says literature is about lies, yeah, that person is not a great critic. When Gandhiji wrote My Experiments with the Truth, now look at the title of his book, My Experiments with the Truth. It is an autobiography. He was trying to tell the world, right, his innermost being. He was trying to reveal to the world his innermost being. And also his personal history, right from childhood to his middle age and above. So now that autobiography becomes something of his own personal experiments with truth. He didn't want to tell lies. For that, he was punished. He tells all that. It is bearing your heart, bearing your soul, disclosure, aletheia. That's what we discussed earlier. So now I don't have much time to discuss. You go and look into history, look into science, look into literature, and come to your own understanding of the post-truth society, the world in which we live, the world our children and grandchildren are going to inherit, what type of world it is, and in this post-truth world, will we really value truth? Whether truth has real value in this world. Because we have come to, I'll give you a classic example. There is nothing true about the reality show on TV. Is there anything real about the reality show? You ask yourself. There are characters who come there, who laugh, who smile, who cry. The reality show is not real. The reality show is not real. They are all paid actors. They are there. But look at everything for their appearance on TV, they are paid. There is nothing real about the reality show. And the threat comes from virtual reality. Is it real? The virtual reality, what we call, people talk about, even virtual cigarettes and so on. What are they? Have you heard of that? Cigarettes and so on. Whether they are real or true, what are they? And Derrida, at one point, he has famously said this: there is some kind of a supplement, a substitution, and people forget the real. Classic example. Now, people watch so much of pornography, which is nothing but image. And this image has become more real than the real sexual act. And they are called actors. People who star in pornographic films, they are called actors. Are they really actors? That is the distinction between real and acting. I stop here. I'll take questions from you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And we live in this post-truth world. You ask me questions, you will get the best out of me.
Thank you, sir, for your informative, meticulous, and highly engaging talk. I think with your permission, shall we take the questions, sir? It's in the chat.
Yeah, please go ahead. I will also open the chat box if they have printed their questions there.
Yes.
Okay, there is this question by Naveen Kumar. Before
Can I take the question, sir?
Yeah, no, I can read it. There is the first one by Pradeep Kumar. How do you advise me to write a research paper titled Post-Truth Era in Indian Politics? A post-colonial perspective. Okay, I'll answer that question first. So now, post-truth era. Say, India, we live in a very complex country, a pluralist society, where there are many claims, right? So in this post-truth era, say after committing certain political acts, people say they have never committed those acts. Okay, so I'll just give you an example. So whenever riots break out in India, there were riots when Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated. The truth of the matter is more than 20,000 Sikhs were killed. Okay. Now, who committed these acts? Did the congressmen alone commit this act? Or did the Johnson also join them in committing the act of killing? Ask yourself. Till today, the question has not been resolved. Who were the men behind? But some of the Congress leaders were punished. There were also others. So what triggered the Godhra incident and how it happened, how many people were killed, who were responsible, we have no answers. Okay? Forget the riots on one side. What is the true economic condition during the Nehruvian era? And there are people who today say no development took place during the period of Nehru. In Tamil Nadu alone, there were 98 dams, big and small, were built when K. Kamaraj was the chief minister. There are many things to that. So now I'm not going into that. If you really want to write something about post-truth era, there is a deliberate attempt to efface certain facts from history or to erase certain facts from history. You go and do a lot of research and find out, how that things stand and what happened to fact-finding missions and commissions. Then I think I will roll up. Say whether there was an age of truth. That's also an interesting question. How we can describe and relate our day-to-day life to truth age or post-truth age in post-modern age to save us from false things or image. Okay, now I'll answer it simply. See, this is something between a reason and emotion. Say, a reason tells you to go and search for the truth. I'm not talking about the enlightenment. You apply your mind. You apply your reason. Then emotion, on the one hand, tries to take you away. No, emotions can cloud your mind, cloud your judgment, cloud your analytical thinking. As a result, you come to believe certain things to be true. Okay? So now look at partition. Many things happen. We do not know how many people perished. Some people put the number to be 25 lakhs of people who have either died because of movement and things like that. Now, some people exaggerate the number because it's an emotive issue. Now, when you try to respond emotionally to a particular situation or a state or an event, it clouds you. Apply a reason. Was it possible for so many, was it possible that, or were it possible that so many people could have been killed and such a thing could have happened? Many things like that. Now, I'm not talking about killings or riots and things like that. Go and dig out facts. Try to. There is nothing called a truth age. So it doesn't mean before 1980s, people were talking only truth. At least it was valued. The moral truths were valued. Intellectual truths were valued. And truths were interpreted. Today, we have lost the capacity even for such judgment and interpretation. That is why we call this post-truth age, where images, fiction, and falsehood flourish. So, and we don't care, as I pointed out. And that is why this age is called post-truth. Now look at the trolls and look at the messages that appear. Especially, how many people, people died during the second wave of pandemic. Whether Were the governments, different state governments, were they telling lies? How many people had died? Do we have the exact number to the world that so many people were afflicted with COVID-19? No. Because people try to correlate facts with the number of people who were burnt on the burning lands, number of people who were buried, number of people who were discharged from hospital as dead, not alive. And the government's claim of numbers of people who died. That is why, did we really care? Did you and I care? Did we try to find out the exact number of people who had perished during the second wave in Uttar Pradesh or in Tamil Nadu or Kerala, any of the states? We never tried. We never cared. And that is why, and there was another group which were, telling the foreign media and others, exaggerating the numbers. It could be 5 times the number, 10 times the number. There was another group. They were also indulging in, skullduggery. So, and it says, post-modern age. I don't know, post-modern age or post-humanist age. We live in a world and where we yield to emotions more than to reason. Okay. Then, anyone? Now, I don't think this is the time for me to discuss the Derrida in detail. I will reserve Derrida for some other day. How can we apply post-truth in literary research, and what kind of writing shall we use post-truth as theory? So far, post-truth hasn't become a codified theory or a theoretical practice. We have, I have come across, I haven't used the names here. There are books, you just type out post-truth, you will come across many journalists who have written about the disappearance of truth from our human society. And, it hasn't become a theory as such. But I was trying to use concepts like Pagisi or even Jean Baudrillard or the concept of Immanuel Kant or even Martin Heidegger, just to bolster my arguments related to post-truth. No one has written anything about post-truth, but religious texts talk about truth. See, even in our ordinary everyday language, say for instance, if you go to North, there's a saying in Hindi, "Jhoot bole kawa kaate." Jhoot bole kawa kaate. If you speak lies, the crows will caw. Do they really caw when you speak lies? This is a way of instilling a moral idea in the heads of youngsters. So don't tell lies. If you tell lies, the crows will tell others that you are telling a lie. Right? Now, in Tamil, there's a saying, "Poi sunna vaayikku bhojanam kedakka." Poi sunna vaayikku. If you tell lies, you will not get your meals. Right? These are all, sayings, and such things are embedded in our unconscious. And the moral values, in the name of moral values, why should we tell the truth and why should we live for truth? But there are theories. For example, I didn't mention Nietzsche. For instance, Nietzsche was about the atheists. For a long time, he said religion itself was nothing but a lie. The whole concept of God as a lie. So even the whole edifice of church or edifice of all these things, they were all lies because it was all based on lies. That was his argument. So, and many people condemn him to be an atheist. All right. So there are many things about religion, God and lie and truth. So even the Bible says the truth will set you free. It refers to God. God will set you free. So, and God is the ultimate reality and so on. So if you really want to know more about the ultimate reality, God as the ultimate truth and reality, you'll find that plenty in theological texts. But when it comes to literary texts, there is nothing that has really become post-truth theory, but we can make post-truth checks on literature. And literature that can claim, literature that claims itself to be propagating truth, right, or reflecting on truth, or telling only truth. And literature obviously cannot tell truth all the time. It is a fair mix of fact and fiction, even in an autobiographical novel. Even a memoir or an autobiography, they have to stand the test or scrutiny of its truth claims. How can we verify the truth claims that you find in an autobiography? We trust the text, we trust the word, we trust the writer. So it is our implicit trust or implicit faith in the writer and in his word. We trust that to be true. Whatever, when someone writes an autobiography, well, whatever he writes is true. We trust the word, we trust the writer. So it is our, I use the term implicit, our implicit faith in the writer. We implicitly believe in historical books. Yes or no? If anything is written, a few years ago, people used to say, "Idalla WhatsApp lo irukku, WhatsApp lo irukku." That means whatever comes on WhatsApp is true. It's almost similar to gospel truth, but that's not true. We have found out that's not true. Someone would come to the department some 5 or 7 years ago when WhatsApp became very popular. It is there in the WhatsApp as if it were found in the Bible or in the Quran or in the Bhagavad Gita, something true. Then we have discovered that, whatever you find in the WhatsApp need not necessarily be true. So, similarly, we believe that is why we subject history, fiction, and any writing. That's what the new historians did. So, you try and check. You try and verify all the historical claims with a counter narrative. If it is a fiction, you use history as another narrative. You juxtapose history and fiction, or fiction and a fictional work and history. Then, as if it were not enough, you also go to subaltern history and make cross references before you accept the mainstream history. Okay, I don't know whether I answered you completely. Unlike other theories, I'm not able to, say something very, very concrete about post-truth because I haven't come across a theorist yet. Anything else?
Sad.
So I think we've come to an end to the questions. On behalf of the Department of English, faculty and students, I thank you, sir. Thank you for your patience and time. I hope it was an interesting session and we learned a lot. It was a treat listening to you, sir. Participants, thank you for your participation and we can meet tomorrow. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Participants, if you're interested to publish your papers pertinent to the topics discussed in the FTB, you can send your papers to litexplorer66@gmail.com. Your paper should reach us before May 2022.
Subject to scrutiny.
It is subject to scrutiny. If your paper is selected, it will be published in the in-house journal. ISSN registered in-house journal. You're most welcome to send your papers. So I come again. The mail ID is litexplorer, LITEXPLORER 66@gmail.com. So kindly take up the feedback form and do answer those questions there at the final day. Please fill the feedback form also. We have posted the link today. And thank you for participating. Thank you all.